And as the first panel discussed, there's identified need to develop a cross-sector approach to development of our regional STEM ecosystems. So this panel picks up on the underlying issue that emerged during the 2013 regional summits, that being a desire to understand the needs of STEM industry and how to make a community a viable destination for STEM industries. So this panel will be led by Charles Hayes. Charles is the president and CEO of the Research Triangle Regional Partnership. He leads one of the most dynamic economic development entities in the South. He previously served on the UNC Board of Governors and is past president of the North Carolina Economic Developers Association. He has been a business owner, a county manager, and a community college instructor. Given that resume, we couldn't think of a better candidate to moderate this panel on STEM industry recruitment. Welcome to the stage, Charles Hayes.
Thank you very much. You put on a pretty tie, you put on a nice suit, and then they put all this mess on you and messes everything up. So I don't know why you even do that. But Asheville, Charlotte, Concord, Edenton, wherever else you are, welcome. Glad to have you here also. Just a little bit about our organization, and extremely a little bit. Our organization is a regional economic development organization. The short answer is we recruit business and industry into the region. We call the region the market area of the triangle, whatever that is. Roughly, it's a 60-mile radius of RDU, 2-point-some million people, very heavily concentrated with STEM disciplines. We work with that in that arena all the time, and we've been very successful. This part of the world, this city-state, is one of the leading city-states on planet Earth. And our organization works to do that. And we do that with a lot of allies, et cetera. NC State University, the other colleges and universities, the community colleges, et cetera, all a part of the team. Of course, the North Carolina Department of Commerce, the local economic developers. And so we're just part of a real well-oiled and honed strategy and system that the state of North Carolina has, and the state of North Carolina has been very successful. So that's us. If you'd like to learn more, do like everything else, go on the web and look, researchtriangle.org, and you will find it. It's my pleasure today to introduce the panelists. Now, I've been here not for the entire conference, but for some. I know you've had wonderful panelists, but you've not seen anything yet. This is really the cool part. They knew they had to have the best right before lunch because you'd all go to sleep or leave or something. So that's what they did. And to start off with, I want to introduce Jennifer Lantz. They've got printed up little things here that's brief bios, and they're so brief I'll read it to you. Jennifer is the Executive Director of the Wilson Economic Development Council. In this capacity, she has been responsible for helping to develop Wilson's impressive STEM industry mix. She has 30 years of experience in economic development and marketing in North Carolina and Virginia. Now, a little bit of the rest of the story. Jennifer has served on the State Economic Development Board to help set the strategy and direction for our entire state. She is if you look at professional economic developers in the state of North Carolina, she will be at the fore. She is one of the best that we have in this area. We have a real treat to have Jennifer here. She is a graduate of the University of Richmond, so she's a spider. Anybody scared of spiders? A lot of people are, but anyway, she is a spider from University of Richmond, and she has a dual degree in political science and urban studies. So Jennifer, come take your seat. Round of applause. Well, Jennifer is going to speak first, not now, but we're going to have her seated in the middle so that it'll look like y'all are looking at Tom and Gabe when you're really looking at Jennifer, so that the TVs can show that and everything. Next, we have Tom White. Tom is the Director of the Economic Development Partnership with the Office of Research, Innovation, and Economic Development at NC State. During his career, Tom accumulated over 15 years of service with the Durham Chamber of Commerce. He also has served as Director of the North Carolina Department of Commerce Division of Employment and Training. 15 years with the Durham Chamber is way diminished on what he did. He ran the Durham Chamber. He ran one of the most successful chambers in our state and in our nation, and it all happened under Tom's leadership. He He's a Duke undergraduate, and in, what did you graduate in, Tom? What was it, political science or something like that? A BA in English.
STEM.
He has a BA in English from Duke and a Master's of Public Affairs from NC State. He also was recruited here as a scholar athlete. He played golf at Duke. And so he is, if you want to see where that sort of stuff works, then you see Tom. Tom is one of the real iconic leaders that has worked in many different disciplines. But NC State, if anybody, if you or anybody else wants to figure out how to find somebody at NC State that could help you in doing whatever, you can go to NC Reach on the website, or you could simply call Tom. That's his job in part. So, Tom. Gabe Doe is the CEO of Shure Food, Inc., headquartered in Greenville, North Carolina. His company is at the forefront of the technology-based food processing industry. He is a graduate. Now, this is obviously written by somebody from NC State, because they said he is a graduate of Eastern Carolina University. Let me tell you, as a graduate of East Carolina University, that place doesn't exist, Eastern Carolina. We do have a Western Carolina, but there is no Eastern Carolina. He's a graduate of East Carolina University and has worked on numerous startup ventures. I just met Gabe today. I did have a conversation with him over the phone in preparation of this, and it's very impressive. He has a degree from ECU in geology and an MBA from East Carolina also. He is the inventor of cold-structured crab technology. He also has a patented technique that revolutionizes the processing of crab meat through the use of protein-binding agent that allows it to be quickly shaped, portioned, and frozen so it can be shipped uncooked to the food service industry. This is revolutionary. This is new. This is going to change the way things are done. And this is what Gabe is doing. So, Gabe. Now, the format is each one of these people will give you a little bit about what they're doing, et cetera. But before I did, I know that we're talking about STEM here, and I don't know if you noticed it, but it just was interesting, I think, that we have multiple degrees here, but we have degrees in political science, urban studies, English, public affairs, geology, and business. I don't see any engineering, I don't see any technology. So we're talking about STEM, but we're talking about it with people that are basically liberal arts or business classically trained. And I think that is phenomenal, because these people that are in leadership positions clearly recognize the benefit and the necessity of a good STEM education. So, and I'm going to sit down. Excuse me.
Good morning. If you know anything about economic developers, we're essentially migrant workers in suits. And so when you get an economic developer that's been in one place for 25 years, you instantly get this aura about you, which is why they brought me here today. Unfortunately, when you get all that age on you, you can't remember anything, so I have to resort to some notes. 20% of all USA jobs are STEM jobs. And the STEM economy in the U.S. is essentially two economies. The first is the professional STEM economy. It's tied to universities, and it creates American innovation, very simply. The second economy is the technical STEM economy. It's tied to high schools, vocational schools, community colleges, and it implements American innovation. So not every STEM worker needs to go to college, quite frankly. In fact, 50% of all STEM jobs don't require a 4-year degree. So when you talk about communities that are non-metropolitan, there is every opportunity to attract STEM workers. STEM workers exist in every single manufacturing plant in North Carolina. In fact, they exist in every single manufacturing plant in the United States and the world. So STEM has become the latest buzzword, but it's an acronym for something that it has existed since manufacturing came into being. STEM workers who have a certificate or have an associate's degree or have extensive experience earn a lot more money than your traditional high school graduate. And that's one way you can really sell the idea of STEM jobs to young people. Traditional manufacturing hires 1.4 additional jobs for every new traditional manufacturing job created. But when you get to innovative and technical and creative manufacturing, it hires 5 jobs for every new job created. And those 5 jobs include some highly skilled jobs like lawyers and accountants, 2 out of the 5. And then the other 3 are medium to low skilled. So it could be your local barista, or it could be somebody working at data entry in a bank. STEM has changed the economy by becoming a buzzword to a large degree. It's made manufacturing companies aware that they have to automate. And as a result of that automation, you've seen a loss in manufacturing jobs. But manufacturing output is higher than it has ever been in the history of our company or our country. And you look at companies, and I'll give you a great example. I could drive you up to a building in Wilson that you would look at and be afraid to go in. It's in a bad neighborhood. It's metal. The metal is rusted. It's bent. There's a bunch of stuff sitting outside. You know, it kind of resembles a junkyard. But you walk in that building, and there are 3 people working, doing the work of what used to be 10. They're using a robot. They're using a laser. They're using a ton of computers, and they're producing about $5 million worth of goods in 1 year with 3 people. So STEM has had a big impact on manufacturing. Now, when you look at trying to attract industry and trying to attract STEM industry, there are some things you have to have. One thing you have to have in your community, quite frankly, is patience. This is not something that comes quickly or easily. So if you want to go after the life science industry, or you want to go after aeronautics, or you want to go after advanced manufacturing, your community needs to have the patience to get there. For me, I think there are 3 really key ingredients for success. The first is a quality site. If you don't have a site, you don't have anything. And if your site is a field in the middle of nowhere down a 2-lane road with no infrastructure, you have nothing, whether you own it or not. In looking at a site, you have to look at transportation. How quickly can you get to an international airport? How far away is a limited access 4-lane highway type road, whether it's an interstate or not? What kind of infrastructure do you have to have? In Wilson, we've put together a couple of parks. We view our parks as having to have water, sewer, natural gas, and electricity. All of that has to be dual feed because these companies can't afford to go down if your water line breaks or if there's a power outage. We also put in stormwater management features so the companies don't have to deal with that, and we put fiber to every site because Wilson is the only city in North Carolina that is a gig city, and that gig city has brought us a lot of growth in our local industry. There are companies in Europe producing plans that go straight to machines in Wilson, North Carolina, where metal is cut. So having that ability, that gig ability, puts us in a different class. We have small companies of Hollywood special effects folks who moved from Hollywood because it's so expensive, and our gig is a lot cheaper than their gig. So the special effects on the Black Swan were done in Wilson, North Carolina. The second thing you have to have is workforce, and workforce is incredibly critical for STEM companies. you need technical people in a 30 to 60 mile radius, and the professional people just need to be somewhere in the USA. And if you don't have those people, you need to have a good long-term plan that shows companies how you're getting to have those people. In our case, we're building a new high school. The high school will be run like a manufacturing plant. Kids will have to badge in, they'll have to badge out. It will be ISO 9000. It will use good manufacturing practices and standards. It has an industrial advisory board, and the industries are teaching the teachers how to teach what they need to know. When you learn English, instead of learning Shakespeare, you're going to learn how to write technical reports, and your math is going to be geared to the computers that you are going to be dealing with and controlling the equipment. This school is coming online in 2015, and we're going to have it ready to graduate the first 75 students by 2020 when the labor shortage in America hits. If you read manufacturing.net, which I'm sure you all read, it's probably your favorite read every day. But if you looked at it on Monday, the headline was Toyota to replace robots with ... humans. And it was a story about how Toyota is bringing back the skilled craftsmen in every one of their plants. And if you read the headline on Wednesday, it was Toyota recalls 6.4 million vehicles, which is exactly why Toyota is bringing back the skilled craftsmen. Companies need skilled technical STEM employees every day. And the average age in Wilson, North Carolina, with 100 manufacturing plants of a skilled craftsman is mid-50s. So it tells you where we are in this battle to have a technical workforce that keeps America viable. Wilson's home to Merck, Sandoz, BDRX, Bridgestone, UTC Aerospace Systems. I mean, we've got a lot of brand name companies. We have the 7th highest average weekly wage in the state and over $2 billion invested by industries. Wilson is also 82,000 people. We are 35 miles from Raleigh and seemingly out in the middle of nowhere. So how did we do it? Very simply, we made local government, the business community, and all of the institutions, educational, medical, everything else in Wilson, partners. And we used the brain power of this entire community to look at who we should go after, and then we went after them. BD came to Wilson in 2008. The first time I talked to BD was in 1996. So when I say you have to have patience, it's a long process. Thank you.
Jennifer, that's great. I was happy to see that Charles Hayes has overcome his traditional shyness in front of audiences and to be able to introduce us with such fanfare. If you really want to see him perform well, on May 22nd, he is the MC of a wonderful event that the Research Triangle Regional Partnership puts on every year, the State of the Region Conference. And if you see him in front of 1,000 people, then you really have a treat. But Charles actually raised $400,000 back around 2002, 2003 to finance a study that was performed by Dr. Michael Porter of Harvard and the Monitor Group that formed the foundational basis for our economic development partnership. It was an industry cluster analysis, and much of the underlying rationale for that was to try to look at STEM education and how we could work together. And that's still going on today. As recently as yesterday, we were down at the governor's office securing a letter of endorsement from Governor McCrory for a new proposal to the National Science Foundation that has an interesting amalgamation of institutional partners. Duke University and North Carolina Central University, Linda's here from Central, UNC Chapel Hill, the Blackstone Entrepreneurs Network, and we here at NC State, to try to look at securing some underwriting for programs and projects to do just what Lou Ebert was touting earlier today from this stage, looking at technology, something that Raj Narayan knows very well, entrepreneurship and commercializing that intellectual property for the all-important end product, creation of jobs and the retention of jobs for North Carolinians. This isn't the first time we've had that kind of partnership. I'll take a couple of examples, like Madhu Berrywell gave us 4 specific anecdotal pieces of evidence. I'll take 3. One is a company that Charles is familiar with, Argos Therapeutics. It started out as Mercell. It's a spin-out from Duke University that back in the 1970s was founded by Dr. Ralph Steinman, who's sadly no longer with us, but before he departed this planet, he earned the Nobel Prize in Medicine. And it was to use dendritic cells and a treatment modality that today employs 100 people in Durham, North Carolina, making a product called Arcelus that has shown great efficacy in their phase 2 clinical trials in treating renal carcinoma. We're very confident that as they approach their phase 3 trial with 450 patients, that we're going to retain that presence and maybe add a couple 300 jobs. The reason I'm offering that as an example is we here at NC State had the good fortune to be STEM-oriented, and accordingly, the venture capital folks that have financed the inception of that company and its continued growth with $200 million of undiluted capital, they engaged us as the project lead with the BTEC that we have here on Centennial Campus, Biomanufacturing Training and Education Center, to provide work-ready, STEM-educated students to actually make their product, and also the BRIGHT program at NC Central. It's a Duke spin-out, and they take advantage of the wonderful medical school that they have at UNC Chapel Hill. We're very excited about perhaps having an advanced manufacturing installation to retain that company while people from Montreal and people from Orlando, Florida try to compete, take them away from us. So it is highly competitive, as Jennifer mentioned, and you have to have all those elements that she just delineated to be competitive. It's just physical infrastructure, most importantly, great quality of life, and a great workforce that can be productive. Take something that's a little bit different than that. Our legacy commodity industries of textiles, furnitures. I'm looking at Marie Griffin, Doug Hummer from the Industrial Extension Service. There's a company called Brooks Brothers, which is a privately held company that's almost 200 years old. Great statement for our country. In 2018, they'll turn 200. Not too many companies make it to 2 centuries. They make 7,000 shirts a week in Sampson County in Garland, and they have a distribution center in Clinton. They make suits up in Boston and Haverhill, and they make ties in Long Island City and Queens and New York. Those plants in Massachusetts and New York are highly profitable. Their shirt manufacturing in North Carolina is not. So we've got to convince, and we have convinced because we have the Industrial Extension Service, their ownership, privately held concern, to give us a couple of years, if we can, to stabilize the company, and using STEM-oriented interventions like Six Sigma and lean manufacturing at our College of Engineering IES, looking at our College of Management Supply Chain Resource Cooperative to look at their distribution, which is now very global. Looking at our College of Textiles, which is like endemic to NC State when you think of textiles. And that's what precipitated our initial engagement with Charles. When Michael Porter said, you guys should be looking at textiles and apparel as a growth industry and nonwovens. And that puzzled all of us, including Ken Atkins, right, Charles? Mm-hmm. And so we had to go to the university to explain what it was that we paid $400,000 for. And it turns out that there's efficacy in his study. So that's and it's a little bit different kettle of fish down there. You have to convince people that are manufacturing that may not have high school diplomas, may not have GEDs, but what they do have is an outstanding work ethic. And they're, for generations, have been able to toil in those older plants that Jennifer alluded to. So we have to make sure that in rural North Carolina that we can show people, as we've talked about, many other speakers like Sam have talked about, the relevance of STEM education to their livelihoods and their family growth in terms of income and also sustainability for their future generations. Finally, the juxtaposition of 2 of those entities. When I worked for Governor Easley at the Commerce Department, Division of Employment and Training, I'll never forget a day in his second term when we were called up to Collins and Aikman in Roxborough. And Raj, if you can look interested, he's heard this story before. Collins and Aikman announced that they were laying off 600 people and closing a plant that had been operational for almost a century. A companion plant in Farmville was closing, about 700 jobs lost, making fabric for the automotive industry. But it was no longer productive, and a private equity firm took them private, and like a lot of deals over the last 20 or 30 years, what happened was the jobs were offshored, so the people who paid the price for what was, I guess, economically for some people a great success was a tragedy for others who'd worked for generations in one of those legacy commodity industry manufacturing plants. That was a 6 a.m. rapid response function as we hurried back to the mansion to announce Credit Suisse was coming to North Carolina in the Research Triangle Park. So if you look at STEM education, that was really relevant because now Credit Suisse is probably approaching 1,000 people. Great coup for North Carolina. hiring college graduates from this institution, Eastern Carolina University, East Carolina, and all of our universities, putting them through a 10-week Wall Street Journal class with left brain and right brain skills. Sit at a computer, learn how to talk to high wealth people about trading securities. We have a lot of people that are good at that. And we know that this is a cluster that works here because now we got Deutsche Bank, Credit Suisse, Fidelity. So that's a good cluster that we never dreamed of back then, 10 or 12 years ago, Charles, right? So finally, the juxtaposition of those two within the same 24-hour period gives you a sense of the challenge in rural North Carolina to try to embed an appreciation with our really hardworking individuals. And, I want to close with two quotes. Another big factor in Wilson's success, besides Jennifer's tremendous acumen, or she's proven just what Charles said, she's able to recruit companies like Merck and BD, life sciences that actually came here initially to go to RTP with research and development for the graduates of our institutions. But there's a guy whose name is on this building that's from Wilson, and he's been pretty special, I think, probably globally. There's nobody better than him. And here's what he says about STEM education in general. Education is the foundation for all we do in life. It shapes who we are and what we aspire to be. We talked about aspirations today in a couple of these sessions. Creativity fuels innovation, and it's what all states should strive to instill in current and future generations. And there's one other alumnus of this great institution, NC State, that I'd like to quote. He's not with us anymore, the late, great William Friday. And here's what he says about the importance of education. Every morning, 1 million North Carolinians get up and go to work for wages which leave them below the poverty line, so they can pay the taxes that finance the education we receive here in higher education. Our job is to figure out how we're going to pay them back. All right. My time's up. Thank you for yours.
Well, thank you for letting me be here, and I'm delighted that I was invited. Coming here, one of the things I'm sure people will expect me to do is give you a little bit of a case study of Shure Foods. But I also want to, point out from what Tom and Jennifer have spoken about and what the previous panel was speaking on, how important these STEM principles are, not just at high-level research, but also underlying manufacturing and production, and how and even most services, but certainly almost any manufacturing or production of goods that you can think of, is underlaid by basic science. And Neil Ferguson did a really nice TED presentation a couple of years ago. If you ever get a chance to, go online and look that up, he really is outlining the comparison of the Western world and the advancement of the Western world to the Eastern world, and now how the Eastern world is catching up with the Western world. And one of the real institutions that he outlines as being so important is the Western world adoption of deductive reasoning, the scientific method, and how we really based our economy and all of our principles from the way our governments are laid out to the way our companies compete and the way we debate ideas as being fundamental to why we took off and have higher life expectancies, et cetera. So before I went back to college, I had a few years where I worked in construction in a business that I can tell you was every day, depended upon people knowing, fairly significant, math skills or science skills or whatever. I mean, some of these guys who are doing construction work, work their way up to good paying, supervising jobs, and not to mention, build good products because of their ability to learn and do fairly high level math and geometry especially, and other areas of, whether it's, concrete, the chemistry behind concrete, et cetera. So if you think about it, somebody's got to know this stuff at a theoretical level, but it really helps when you have an educated workforce, going out every day. You don't think about it, but those little things are adding up. Each one of those guys out there working on a construction site or in a plant or whatever, if they know a little bit more math and a little bit more chemistry, or whatever it is, it adds up, and multiply that across our entire economy, and mistakes that are missed or things that are solved, the problems that are figured out. It's just like, over at Toyota, as you're talking about, getting skilled workers in. So this idea of STEM really, trickles down all the way through, right to the very, right to the very basics of, your economy. And the idea of deductive reasoning. And Elon Musk, really puts a lot of emphasis on the idea of first principles. I mean, I think it's a really extraordinary way to go about running and thinking about your business. Is he really makes his business decisions, a lot of them based on fundamental, science principles. Where a lot of times we get into a room and you have to have a certain amount of, conversation and just, this idea of throwing things against the wall. But really, if you can cut out a lot of that and get a lot of it back to just, does this fit the basic principles of science, you can really expedite the process of innovation and developing a business. And I mean, there's nobody in the world that I can think of that can demonstrate that better than Elon Musk. And he says, if you listen to this man, I mean, over and over again, he says, he always comes back and looks at things based on first principles, I mean, really basic physics and how much energy is going into this process, and is that going to be economical? You can really tie these things back to economics. As far as recruitment, outside of, having a good workforce and an educated workforce, as an entrepreneur, you need to really, first it helps to have a good idea. I mean, you can pitch a bad idea or a not so good idea better than somebody with a good idea and maybe come out ahead. But once you have a good idea, and you can get the word out that you have a good idea, and you go through all of the troubles and aches and heartache that it takes to get just to that point where people will start listening to you, what you'll find is, and what you need to know and understand is that, just as a gentleman on the panel before us was saying, engineers, I'm not saying that all engineers are not creative, but he was talking about how there's a real bent towards their focus on analytics and not being as creative. Well, what you'll find is, this whole world is made up of all these unique individuals, and if you have a creative idea and you can get the word out and it's a good idea, that creativity will attract people that want to put their skills to work. So you have all these, brilliant people, and they're looking for some place to apply themselves. And so you need to do a good job of bringing your idea out to the forefront. We need to do a good job, if you look at that at the level of North Carolina, of bringing the great ideas that are, stuck in all these little corners of North Carolina, whether it's in a university or some little town out, in the middle of nowhere or wherever. And we need to try and help bring those ideas up to the forefront, because there are many, many talented people who are just, looking for some place to come and, and be able to blossom with, the ideas and skill sets that they've developed. People from everywhere, from all over the world will come, they'll come to North Carolina if they can get passionate about the idea that's being presented to them. And that, of course, leads us into the importance of networking all these things that are going on and in North Carolina, and looking back as an entrepreneur, just as your creative idea, if it's a good idea, will attract people to start coming and working for you and getting involved with your idea, even without any pay for a good bit of time. If they really believe in what you're doing. It was amazing the people that have come, to Shure Foods and supported this as we've just started to raise money and now bringing our product to market, and which will be on the market this summer, and things are looking really good. They will come and support you, but also the economic developers and the people like Jennifer and Tom, they spend their entire life, and day after day going out there and meeting with people and networking with people and talking about how great it will be, for North Carolina to excel here or there, and how do we get the funding, and how do we to do that, and how do we get the government to support this. But they're still waiting for somebody to come along with a with an idea, right? I mean, you still got to have a product or service to put all that to work. So one thing as an entrepreneur I've discovered and took for granted for a long time was that all these people are just out there waiting to help you and serve you. I mean, that's what gets them out of bed every morning. And I don't know how to do it, but you need to let other entrepreneurs know that it's not just a series of perfunctory steps, which is what it feels like a lot of times that you go through to utilize these services, but it's more than that. It's that these folks and these organizations, these universities, they're looking at you. They mean you have a role to play in this world, and that role is, to get your idea out there so that other people can get around it and start supporting it. And with that, those folks will help you find the resources that you need, to keep developing that idea. Now, the story behind Shure Foods that I can kind of back that up with is, I started off with an idea. I had done some research on crab pheromones at East Carolina in the early O's. That really did a lot for me because we took that a long ways, never made a commercial product out of it, but I was able to participate in the UNC Charlotte 5 Ventures business plan competition. We actually won that with this concept we had behind creating a bait with crab pheromones. After winning that competition, we gained the services and also the respect of a lot of service providers and accountants and different people that were important to my ability to get this new concept off the ground that I started on in 2006, which without using those resources through the university, et cetera, I don't know how I would have ever gotten anybody to really, take me seriously and, back me on filing the patent and doing all the expensive legal work and processes behind that. But going forward, as the process took some time, I went back to business school, and at East Carolina, I got involved with the Entrepreneurial Initiative. And the Entrepreneurial Initiative at ECU, helped me with the business planning, et cetera, but they put me in contact with the North Carolina Biotechnology Center. And the North Carolina Biotechnology Center looked at it as applied biotechnology. We use a protein binding technology in succulent crab. And they, provided us with an inception loan. And that inception loan allowed us to continue to pay for the patent process, et cetera. Once we achieved the goal of getting the patent, we then had investors that were ready to come on board. And so we raised a good amount of money. And then with raising that fair amount of money, we had a little bit of momentum behind us. And the NC Biotechnology Center looked back at us and said, hey, you guys have really done something. You started off with a goal and you took it to here, and now you got real investors behind it. You might be right for a collaborative funding grant. And so we went to Dr. Tyree Lanier, who's sitting over here here at NC State, who's an expert in seafood proteins. And we said, Dr. Lanier, we've got this technology, and he was very interested in it. It fit right into what he had done in his career, and we want somebody that would join us on this proposal for this grant. And NC Biotech liked what we were doing and liked the team that we had put together, and now Dr. Lanier's research team has I forget how much it is total, but about $175,000 grant to study raw crab proteins, which of course ultimately benefits our company, because that's research that we would have to have found a way to do internally, find the people, et cetera. So there's a series of events where we used the resources available here in North Carolina to tap into the skills that are here around STEM in North Carolina. In addition to that, we've used CMAS quite extensively down in, which is also an NC State run facility down in Moorhead, to do a lot of our prototype work and pilot production work, and even to do some of our business meetings. So I sort of discovered, these avenues, but we need to go out and really teach entrepreneurs how to do that. We need to educate them on how to do that, and not just on how to do it, but that it's a role that they play in the economy. So,
the old joke about the preacher took his watch off, and the son looked at his dad and said, "What did it mean when the preacher took his watch off?" And the father looked at his son and said, "Absolutely nothing, son." So I don't know if y'all can get to lunch on time or not, but we'll see. The title of this session is Winning Strategies for STEM Industry Recruitment. And you've heard a lot of the things that are necessary from an entrepreneurial level to a more mature company level to everything. But your keynote speaker today earlier was Madhu Beriwal, and I wasn't here, so I don't know what Madhu said. But Tom was very instrumental in recruiting that company here. And so, Tom, take just a few minutes, and since this is Winning Strategies for STEM Industry Recruitment, that's an example that the keynote speaker was recruited here. Tom was involved in that. So briefly, how'd that work?
Well, real quickly, and you played a prominent role. It's all about partnerships. That's what you just described. Madhu told a story about, she had a 25-year-old enterprise and was very successful modeling Hurricane Pam, so she was a known entity in Washington. We had some experience with Katrina. We had a $5 million national emergency grant to serve Katrina evacuees and their families who came here. We had the very same dismal experience with FEMA, but we had the good fortune to have Governor Hunt and Governor Easley put together a faith-based and community organization initiative. So we knew what Madhu did, modeling, and we also had the good fortune to have a wonderful resource here on campus with Dr. Michael Young, the Digital Games Research Center, a collaboration. We've talked a lot about interdisciplinary, multi-institutional. Well, we practice that, not just preach it. Our College of Design has Tim Bowie. So we had two guys, Michael Young in computer science and engineering and Tim Bowie in design, who were very adept at designing games. And when Madhu and her site selection team came, we were posited and pitted against Bobby Jindal at, and Madhu and Bobby Jindal kind of hit it off. Stephen, Madhu was on the state workforce commission for Bobby Jindal. He offered her $25 million to stay in Louisiana, to move her to New Orleans. And then Charles convinced her to not go to Charlotte. He said, "Why would you go to Charlotte? Why don't you come here to RTRP? We are the perfect
I didn't
place."
do that.
And he did that beautifully when Pat McCrory went, Governor McCrory was in Mayor McCrory at Charlotte. So it's a very competitive enterprise. But long story short is we beat out Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, and Louisiana. She came here because of talent. And you heard her talk about that. And she was originally domiciled in Research Triangle Park. And the collaboration involved not just the Department of Commerce and former Governor Beverly Perdue, but also we had the North Carolina Military Foundation, because she does a lot of contract work with the U.S. Army and a lot of things in military defense and homeland security. So we had and then Jennifer talked about the site. We had a nice building in RTP. She's come back over on the Wake County side but she hires our talent. That's the thing. She's got about 75 or 80 people, and it was our talent that she talked about. She wants to get in the queue for that Institute for Advanced Analytics. Charles is a great salesperson. By the time that he finished with her, she was focused on where am I going to go in the research triangle. So it's a team effort. Somebody has to be able to find sites. And then our scientists, the Michael Youngs of the world, and one thing I might offer, and you alluded to this in your presentation, which was excellent. Our faculty were actually nervous when we went down to Baton Rouge. I said, "Tim, just pretend you're teaching a graduate class. They're just board members. They're her investors, And he loved it. When they would come back here to the BTEC, when we'd entertain them, and Raj used to see this, he couldn't do enough for them. He said, "This is fun. Economic development is fun. It's not this black box activity. It seems like it because we're so covert in the way we talk in code projects. But our faculty like to do that. Not everybody, but we are an engaged university. We're a land grant. So most of our faculty come here because they want to go visit places in Sampson County."
They were really nervous because when we got on the state jet to fly down there, and you went on it, you got on it, it was all raggedy and falling down, and we taxed it out and then taxed it back. And And we said, you got to get off because this plane is not safe to fly. We got to fix something. We said, oh, good.
Give me 10 more seconds. We had Scott Ross from the community colleges, and they are a wonderful institutional partner. They are really hands-on. Keith Crisco was our Commerce Secretary. This was the very first project that they announced when the new administration came in. This was Beverly Purdue's first announcement. So we actually had this occur. Madhu Berrywell stood up and shook Keith Crisco's hand and said, here's the incentive package. I'm coming to North Carolina. Charles stood up and said, my daddy told me to say, never talk past the sale. We're out of here. So, and that was, right now there's 100 people that are working here, and they're not working in Louisiana. So sad for Jindal, but good for us, right?
So the message from that is teamwork and bring your whole team, and that's what Jennifer said, and the message to the local deal was to get teamwork. I've got a question for Jennifer also, but before I get that, I have a question from Gabe. Gabe, you're an entrepreneur. You've got a business, hopefully it will be very successful. Why are you in Greenville?
Well, if you really probably want to look at it from just why, it's because of East Carolina University and how I ended up there as a student at East Carolina University and how good East Carolina University was to me. Looking back, I don't think I appreciated it enough when I was a student there, but I was able to, as an undergraduate, have a research lab of my own and do research on crab pheromones. And then, as a graduate student, I had all kinds of support from the business school and the entrepreneurial initiative there to support me on this new startup. And in fact, one of my board members is a former professor of mine from the business school. So that's Greenville, specifically Eastern North Carolina, obviously, because I'm dealing with seafood, and North Carolina is a great, as far as I'm concerned, you can look around the world and the crab industry exists all over the world, and we'll probably source raw materials from all over the world, but the combination of the resource and I think the ability to do business in a great way and the economic support that we have is all sums it up.
And that's what I expected the answer would be, and the takeaway to that is how do you, again, with the title of our panel here, Winning Strategies for STEM Industry Recruitment, if you recruit the talent, you'll get the industry. Gabe was recruited or went to ECU for some reason. Had he gone to State, or had he gone to UNC Wilmington, or had he gone to Appalachian, or if he'd gone to, God forbid, outside of the state, that's probably where this business would have been, a very high likelihood. So the ways to recruit talent into your community, whether you're urban or rural or whatnot, is crucial. And Jennifer, you did a magnificent job explaining the takeaway that I got out of it was product and product development, sites, education, workforce, all of that's part of the product that you use. Is it as simple to say that Wilson is one of the real success stories in our state for non-urban areas that's been able to recruit STEM industries? And is it as simple if everybody around the state in the different geographies, different regions, different areas would do the same? Would they be as successful, do you think? Is it that simple? If we get the talent and get the product and then go call on the folks and sell them, you'll win.
I think it starts with a plan. For me, I never know what I'm doing if I don't know what I'm doing. So the first thing I did when I came to Wilson in 1989 was I just listened. I listened to everybody, and it didn't matter how wild the idea was or how simple the idea was. I listened to what everybody had to say. And then after doing that, I got together a group of people who helped me put together a strategic plan. It's hard to go after something if you don't know what you're going after. And then once I had my plan in place, I looked at the community to see what it truly lacked. I didn't do a SWOT analysis. I don't care anything about a SWOT analysis. At the end of the day, what are you missing? It isn't those strengths and weaknesses. It's something. What is that something? What is that one key thing that lets you start down a path? In our case, it was having appropriate product. And then once I determined that, then I looked at how do you get the infrastructure in such a way that any international company would come in here and put a plant. And I came to Wilson from the Richmond, Virginia area, and my job was to recruit Asian and European industries. And so my focus before I came to Wilson had been so international. I had never worked with an American company until I came to Wilson. And so I looked at things from that really broad perspective. And I think, honestly, if you've got a plan, you have the product, and you have the infrastructure, or you can show that you are building the infrastructure in a time frame, it really doesn't matter where you are in North Carolina. You can attract great companies.
Okay, questions from the audience? And thank you, Jennifer.
Jennifer, this is kind of a follow-up on what you just said. I've had either the privilege or the misfortune of working for probably hundreds of municipals across lots of the country. And I don't know them all very well, but what I know of particularly the senior administration in Wilson is that they run the municipal systems, utilities and such closer to a business mentality than most any municipal I've been around. And I don't know if that's born or made. And I think that's part of the attractiveness to business. And I wonder if you comment on how that evolved. I think you've been there long enough to have seen it.
Well, it's made. It's not necessarily born. I own a manufacturing plant in Virginia. I understand the bottom line. I hire the dregs of society. My workers are convicted felons. They're sex offenders. I make mulch. It's a low margin product. I'm constantly looking at how can I improve productivity? How do I automate? How do I figure out a way to educate my worker enough so that I can pay him more? None of my workers are college educated, nor will they ever be. So I bring that mentality to the Economic Development Council. And in doing so, we look at return on investment. It really doesn't matter how many companies visit Wilson in a year. What matters is how many deals do I close? What kind of tax dollars do I give back to the community, and how many jobs are created? And what are the salaries of those jobs? Are they paying a living wage? The city manager and our brand new county manager, who just got announced yesterday, bring that same focus to their organizations. And it's because of the amount of business and industry in Wilson. It's everywhere. And so even if you didn't want to have a business focus, you would end up with a big business focus.
Other questions?
Thank you. I'm hoping that my question, first of all, is relevant to this panel. But linking back to the many regional meetings that we had, we talked about that this morning. At a couple of the sites that we had the meetings, there was a large discussion, a large portion of the discussion that was about the military, and the military being a pipeline into the workforce pool. So can you speak to the role and the potential role of the military in terms of the strategies for recruitment and accessing that talent pool?
Well, I'll start off with it. It's tremendous. We have, I don't know off the top of mind what the numbers are, but there are a large number of military people that are processed out every year at Camp Lejeune and at Fort Bragg primarily, but also at Pope and also at Goldsboro. So they're looking for something. Where we're really seeing a lot of the initiatives is there's been a strategic alliance that's made with the university system and with the special ops system that's doing a lot of training there, and that's going across the university system. But we're also seeing all these entrepreneurial companies that people are coming out of the military and they're starting up. It's unbelievable, and they're doing really, really cool stuff. And it's and that is from what they learned in the military, and they're going to do that somewhere with ForceCom now at Fort Bragg. That's it's easier for them to stay in this area once they process out than it was perhaps in the past. We're close enough to DC so that they can do whatever they need to do there. It's really and talk about special ops or dog man. I don't know what they do, you know. But anyway, it's really cool stuff, I think. So that's one of it. I don't know that, you know, and a lot of it, though, depending on how long they're in, you know, we say, well, you got all these people processing out of the military, so that's ready workforce. Well, I processed out of the military in California. I never considered staying in California. So a lot of them just go home, but it is an asset.
Well,
Tom,
it's
you
a
would
tremendous asset to our state. And Governor McCrory has actually built on what Governor Perdue used to say, that we're third in true presence, but 26th in procurement. So there's business generation opportunities for the talent that's coming back home. But also our systems, our public workforce system is kind of Byzantine as far as accessing it. We have different nomenclature for occupational titles, so what they've been trained to do in the service is not necessarily coordinated really well with our labor market information. And we found this when we were recruiting Madhu's company. The occupational titles that we had and the job descriptions were somewhat archaic. So as the Department of Labor is trying to upgrade that with our workforce commissions, we're trying to do that in tandem. And we have some infrastructure here, like the North Carolina Military Foundation. So but what a great resource. We should never have the situation where we've got a mismatch in workforce demand and workforce skills. If we're the place, and it's just like universities, when we look at alumni, we have like a 17-member UNC system. People are wanting to come home. And a little commercial, on May 1st, we're having a Recruit North Carolina Alumni Career Fair in Charlotte. And June 12th, we're having a Recruit North Carolina Alumni Career Fair here at McKimmon Center. And what we've seen is with the privates too, Duke and Wake Forest and High Point, all around the state, people, if they've been downsized out of a job around the country, saying, you know, I had a really positive experience in North Carolina. And that's what our retiring military are thinking. I had a good time down there. I got my skill set. So let me come home. So if we can keep having folks like Jennifer and folks like Gabe start companies and Jennifer recruit them, we should have a work supply that can be STEM oriented and be a great resource, you know, to attract more of, and that's what Governor Hunt built 4 terms on.
Got time for one more question if there is one.
I got a question for Tom and you, Carl. You've talked about all the things we've done right, and a lot of the stories that you tell, maybe people don't know how these companies got here. But there's probably things that we're not doing right. What are 1 or 2 things that we could do better, that we got some hope of actually making a change to and actually do better on?
That's a hard one, John. I'll let you.
We could do to improve the recruitment of companies. I don't think we do a good enough job in waving the state flag, if you please. I think that we need to have more of a presence internationally, just telling the North Carolina story and the wonderful, wonderful story that is North Carolina. I think we need to put more resources doing that. That's one thing.
I would say you need a bigger staff to go out and knock on doors. You cannot do this over the internet or over the telephone. And Wilson's success, it lies completely in the fact that we spend a ton of time on the road every year talking directly to CEOs, talking to directors of engineering, vice presidents of manufacturing. You cannot do it from a desk in Raleigh.
Yep. One example on that, in the state of North Carolina, our state has offices that focus on trade opportunities. What, Tom, they have 10 or 12 of those around the nation, I mean, around the world. But they don't have housed in those same places people that are focused on foreign direct investment. Well, it seemed like, okay, that's kind of a simple thing. Why don't we do that? So simple things like that.
Yeah, but maybe subordinating our ideological differences, which are real. It sounds Pollyannish. For economic development, historically, we've been able to put those aside to recruit the Mercs, the great companies, because you got to convince at the end of the day a chairman and a CEO of a company, whether it's Silicon Valley based, to come here. You know, 50 years ago, IBM came here. That wasn't happenstance. That was Terry Sanford endorsing John Kennedy's nomination for the presidency and him being in the White House with his predecessor, Luther Hodges. If you think about all the people that John Kennedy could have named as United States Secretary of Commerce, with all of his connections and his father, who does he name? Luther Hodges.
And we're getting-
rural state. And how did he met Tom Watson, and then they buy 500 acres in 1964, when that was really outlandish. No Interstate 40 road, and the rest is kind of history.
So we're getting the hook, but one other thing on that, we cannot diminish the importance of incentives. And North Carolina needs to say, we want these companies here, and we're willing to invest.
And I'll give you an opposite of that. In 2004, Bristol-Myers Squibb was looking at this area very hard, and their corporate real estate director is a good friend of mine. So after it was all over and all said and done, and Wilson was out, and Holly Springs was out, and we were all out, I said, okay, Jim, what really happened? Well, it turned out that the governor of Massachusetts and the CEO of Bristol-Myers Squibb grandsons were rooming together in college. And so when I say we need to get on the road, we need to get on the road. We need to know people, because economic development is all about the relationships you build, not just in North Carolina, but across the world. If I could, I want to give you all a little bit of homework. And that is, there's a great book. It's a short read. I promise it won't bore you to tears. It's called The New Geography of Jobs. It's by Enrico Moretti. He's an economist at Berkeley, but it's not super boring, I promise. And it actually talks about this area. And what it talks about is where jobs are going to be in the United States in the future. And everyone in this state needs to read that book.
This is the second meeting I've been in today. All the meeting also recommended that book, and I have read it, and I do recommend it also. Thank you for your attention, and we'll leave.
And just like in school, let's thank our panelists real fast.